This is Miss Humbert here, and today we're going to be doing Unit 5, Learning Target 11. So now we're going to look at solving quadratics. So we learned a whole bunch of different methods to solve quadratics. So now we're going to kind of take them and apply them both to what we're learning. So let's take a look at some of these examples. So starting off, we learned 3 different methods to solve quadratics. The first was graphing, and then you would find the x-intercepts. Well, we talked about how finding the x-intercepts isn't accurate because we draw things a little bit differently. So typically if we want to solve quadratics accurately, we're going to use factoring and the zero product property or the quadratic formula. So those are the main ones that we're going to practice today. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. So we're going to actually practice that on 2 different versions. So let's start by using the zero product property. We're going to use the zero product property to solve this problem right here. So the first thing we're going to do is set up our x. So we have 1 times 20, and that's going to give us 20. So we're multiplying to 20 and adding to 9. So I'm asking myself, what multiplies to 20 and adds to 9? Well, that's going to be 5 and 4. So then when I go out to factor this, I'm going to split up this 9x. So I'm putting an x with each of those, and I'm going to use that to split up 9x. So I have x squared, that's going to stay the same. Now I'm going to split up that 9x as 5x plus 4x plus 20. And now I'm ready to factor by grouping. So I'm going to make my 2 groups. Whoops. Alright, so I'm going to make my 2 groups. So I'm going to do a group here and a group here. Well, out of my first group, I can take out an x. So I'm dividing each of those terms by x. And then I'm left with x plus 5. Out of my second group, I can take out a 4. So I'm dividing each of those terms by 4. And I'm left with x plus 5. So I notice here that my leftovers are matching. That's a good thing. So I'm going to factor those out. And once I factor those out, I'm going to write what's left after that, which is x plus 4. Now remember that this original equation was set equal to 0. So I'm going to take each of these factors and set them equal to 0 and solve for x. So here when I solve for x, I end up with a -5, and here a -4, because here I subtracted 5 from both sides, here I subtracted 4 from both sides. So the answer when we use the zero product property was -5, -4. Well, we better hope that the answer is the same when we use the quadratic formula. So let's do that. So we're going to assign our a, our b, and our c value. So a is equal to 1, b is equal to 9, and c is equal to 20. What I'm trying to show you is that you can use these 2 methods interchangeably. So using the quadratic formula, x is equal to the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4a and c all over 2 and a. So then what we're going to get is we're going to get -9 plus or minus the square root. Now we're going to simplify underneath the radical right here. So we're going to take those numbers, you can punch that into your calculator, and you end up with 1 divided by 2. So now we want to create our 2 versions. So first I'm going to do -9 plus the square root of 1. And then I'm going to hit enter in my calculator to get the answer. Then divide that by 2. And I end up with a -4. So far, that's one of the answers that I got over here. Then I'm going to take a -9, and I'm going to subtract the square root of 1, hit enter, then divide it by 2. And I end up with a -5. Again, you should be calculating these along with me to make sure you're getting the right answer. And that's also the answer that I got over there. So it worked both ways. That's awesome. Okay, that's what we're trying to show. So let's see if we can do that for a number or for this one. So if we notice, if we were to graph this quadratic, okay, we would cross at -4 and -5. Okay, that's if you were to have graphed that quadratic. Pretty cool, huh? Okay, well let's take a look at number 2. So for number 2, we want to use the zero product property. So we're going to take 1 times a -24, and that's -24, and we're adding to 10. So because it's a negative product, we need a positive and a negative factor. So I'm going to use positive 12 and -2. And now I'm ready, I can split up this middle term here. So I have x squared plus 12x minus 2x minus 24. And now I'm ready to factor by grouping. So out of that first group between x squared and 12x, I can take out an x. And then when I divide each term by x, I'm left with x plus 12. Then out of each term, I can take out a -2. So I'm going to take a -2 out of each term. Now that's going to change the signs of everything. I knew to take out a negative term because there's that negative there. And when I do that, I'm left with x plus 12. So I can see that my leftovers are matching, so I can factor those out. And then I'm going to write what's left after that, which is x minus 2. Now remember that this original equation was set equal to 0. So now we're going to take and set each of those equations equal to 0. So x plus 12 is equal to 0, and x minus 2 is equal to 0. So we solve those for x. So for the first one, we're going to subtract 12 from both sides, and we get that x is equal to -12. For this one, we're going to add 2 to both sides, and we get that x is equal to 2. So x is equal to -12, and x is equal to 2. So that's our final answer when we use the zero product property. Now let's use the quadratic formula. So my a is equal to 1, my b is equal to 10, and my c is equal to -24. So then what we're going to do is we're going to do the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4a, and then c is a -24, all over 2a. So now what we can do is we can go ahead and we're going to simplify underneath the radical. So you're going to plug that part into your calculator first. So we're going to get -10 plus or minus the square root. Well, 10 squared minus 4 times 1 times -24 is 196. Again, be plugging in that calculator to make sure that's what you get. And 2 times 1 is 2. So now we're going to split it up into our two versions. So first, we're going to do -10 plus the square root of 196. You're going to type that into your calculator and hit enter. Then you're going to do divided by 2. And when you divide it by 2 for the first one, you end up getting 2, which is good. That's what we got here. Now we're going to do the minus version. And hopefully we get the same. Divided by, and then we're going to divide it by 2. And when you do that, you should get a -12. So for the homework on this and the note sheet, I do want you to be showing me both methods. Even though they both work, we're going to practice using both methods today. And here's why. So first of all, if you look at this parabola, here's the graph of the parabola we just did. If you notice, it's crossing at -12 here, and it's crossing at 2 here. So if it's accurately drawn, the graph will cross at the 2 points that we found in those previous quadratic formula and zero product property. So let's take a look at this one. So let's use the zero product property. So we're going to set up our x. So we're going to do 2 times -4, and that's -8. So we're multiplying to -8 and adding to 3. So we have a positive product and a negative product. There is no way I can find something to make this x work. This is not factorable. So the zero product property is not going to work. However, if the zero product property isn't going to work, that doesn't mean that the quadratic formula won't work. So let's go ahead and let's at least try. We have to at least try that quadratic formula. So a is equal to 2, b is equal to 3, c is equal to -4. So now we're going to plug this into the quadratic formula. So x is equal to the opposite of b, which is going to be a -3, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. So then we're going to get -3 plus or minus the square root. So now you want to simplify what's underneath here. You're going to plug that into your calculator. 3 squared minus 4 times 2 times -4. And that gives you 41 divided by 4. So now we're going to go and we're going to create our two versions. First, I'm going to do my positive version. So -3 plus the square root of 41, hit enter, and then divide it by 4. And then I get a huge long decimal. So the three numbers are 0.850. Now remember, we want to round it to 2 decimal points. So we look at the third decimal point. Because it's below 5, we're going to keep the numbers the same. So it was a huge long decimal. It wasn't a whole number. It wasn't a rational number. So because it wasn't a rational number, that is why the zero product property didn't work out. So now we're going to do the minus version. Again, -3 minus 41, hit enter, and divide it by 4. And that gives you -2.350, going on and on and on. Take a look at that third number. It's below 5. So when we round, we're going to keep that second number the same. So those are the two answers. So in that case, the quadratic formula did work, but the zero product property didn't. If you look at the graph on the x-axis, it's between two numbers, and it's not a rational number. So that's why the zero product property didn't work. But if we were to estimate these points as decimals, that's where our zero product property answer came in. Last but not least, let's take a look at number 4. So first we're going to solve this using the zero product property. So 3 times 5 is 15, and adding to 2, well, it's a positive 15. So both of these have to be positive since our sum is positive. So there's no way that's going to work out. That's not factorable. But again, we can't just assume it's not going to work out. We do have to try the quadratic formula. So our A is equal to 3, our B is equal to 2, and our C is equal to 5. So let's go ahead and let's plug that into the quadratic formula. So we get x is equal to the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. So now you want to simplify underneath the radicals. So you want to simplify this out. And again, I forgot to put it there, but it's a good idea to put parentheses around that. So you're going to plug that exactly into your calculator. And once you've done that, you get negative 2 plus or minus the square root. Now when you simplify that radical, you get negative 56. That is all divided by 6. Now it just so happened in this case that the quadratic formula didn't work out either. So that means we have no solution. So just because that zero product property didn't work out doesn't mean that the quadratic formula won't work out. Sometimes the quadratic formula does work out like it did in number 3. So that's why we use the quadratic formula to check. Well, in this case, the quadratic formula didn't work out either. So if you look at the graph, the reason why they didn't work out is because our quadratic is never going to cross the x-axis. Those answers don't exist. That's why there's no solution, because if you look, our parabola is way up here, so it's never going to cross the x-axis. So last but not least, let's just kind of sum up. So factoring doesn't work when the x can't be solved. So that means that the roots are not irrational, or there's no solution. So there's two things that could happen. Either way, we have to try and use the quadratic formula. So that's the biggest thing I want you to take out of this. Is if the zero product property doesn't work, you have to try the quadratic formula. It might not work, but you still have to try it. If you just always want to try the quadratic formula first, you can do that. Okay, you decide which method you want to try first. I think factoring is easier, but factoring doesn't always work when the quadratic formula does. So really, you pick the method. So go ahead and show me your completed note sheet when you're done. Thanks for listening.